Well, we've been waiting to go to the big board today, take a look at the electoral map. RFK Jr. suspending his campaign, Democratic convention wrapping up in Chicago. What's the state of the race? Short answer, we don't know. It's close. But where do we start here? That's one question. So the Democrats on this particular version of the map with 226 electoral votes. Republicans over here, 235, 77 toss-ups. Here's the question. See, North Carolina's shaded kind of a pinkish light red, meaning it's leaning red. I'm going to put that in yellow. And what yellow means is that North Carolina is a swing state. That would get us to 7 swing states. I think that's probably fair. That gets us 226, 219, 93 toss-ups. Okay, now let's talk about this. These states are not created equally. So here's the easiest path for Harris still, after wrapping up the convention, is to rebuild the blue wall, right? Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Easier said than done, right? So she's polling better in Wisconsin and Michigan. Let's make both of those blue for a moment and see what happens. So Pennsylvania and Michigan are blue. Here's the problem. If she doesn't win Pennsylvania, like we shade it to the red side, say it's really close. Say Trump wins. Where does that get us? So now Harris 251 and Trump 238. It's really tough for Harris because even if she goes out west, right, Arizona, Nevada, and makes those blue, that only gets her to 268. She'd have to win one of these states, North Carolina or Georgia. You know, we'll make North Carolina red in this particular iteration of things. Hasn't gone Dem since 08 when Obama won it. And then she would need to win Georgia. But of course, if Trump wins Georgia, he's over the top, 270 to 268. That's why Pennsylvania is so important. Obviously, we make Pennsylvania any version of blue, and Harris is there, 287. Okay, so that's the point about Pennsylvania. So we go back to 2020 when Biden beat Trump, and we dig into Pennsylvania a little bit because it's really interesting. This is where we can get to RFK a little bit. It was so close. See how red Pennsylvania is, except, you know, Philly in the east, Pittsburgh in the west, and all the red, the Alabama in the middle, James Carville comparison you always hear. Joe Biden 50, Trump 49, essentially. Look at that number. So here's the number here. We'll back up for just a second. I just want to point this out. 48.8 for Trump. This is what Trump does. Trump's run for president 3 times. He gets his number, right? So we work in not only the 2020 race, but the 2016 race. It's basically the same number, percentage-wise. 48.5, 48.8. So Trump gets his number. What's the difference? Gary Johnson, 2.4%. Jorgensen was running there, only 1%. So the fewer candidates, usually the worse Trump does. That's the point I was trying to make earlier. So it's not only Pennsylvania where that applies. This is the last one I'll show you. It's states like, and this is why Bobby Kennedy probably was in Arizona today. That's where they're really watching it. But same thing, Arizona. Trump gets his number, high 40s, very high 40s there. He almost beat Biden, but he didn't last time around. He did in 2016. Again, very close, 48.7, 49.1. Different. Johnson's at 4%. Jorgensen only 1.5%. So the more candidates that are in, usually, you know, the fewer candidates are in, I should say, the worse Trump has done historically. These 2 other times that he's run for president. That's the other side. It's not as simple as saying Kennedy gets out and it helps Trump. It might, but it might not. To the panel, Republican strategist, radio talk show host Malik Abdul joins us. There's Malik, Democratic strategist Jonathan Cott as well. Jonathan, you first on that, on the Bobby Kennedy getting out and the impact of it. My point is we just don't know. It's not that simple. What do you say?
I don't think we know, but I think you made an excellent point. Donald Trump can't get over 50%. He needs other people in the race to drag it down so that he can win like he did in Pennsylvania with 48%. Bobby Kennedy getting out of the race, I think his support was waning once people got to know him. He is a fringe kind of lunatic candidate. He has, you know, weird conspiracy theories that he follows, dangerous vaccines. He's friends with Alex Jones and Jeffrey Epstein. So I understand why he is attracted to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump appreciates his support. But I think these people were probably going to vote for Donald Trump anyway, so I don't think it makes much of a difference.
So the other side of it, Malik, I have that on the tablet here. I could bring it up. There was a poll done, Cook did it, and they talked to swing state voters. They said to them, who'd you vote for if RFK drops? And 46% Trump, 26% Harris. So the math on that basically is that it would be net probably a 1-point gain for Trump. Obviously, you don't win nationally, but the point is it might help Trump. My point, and what we were just talking about, is that it might not because Trump just gets his number. What's your view on the impact of Kennedy getting out?
Well, a couple of months ago, the conversation that we were having is that RFK actually being in the race hurts Donald Trump. Now the conversation that we're having is that RFK getting out of the race may not necessarily help Donald Trump. You're right. It may not necessarily help Donald Trump. But look at what happened in Georgia. Joe Biden beat Donald Trump in Georgia by about 11,799 votes. That's a similar margin in places like Arizona. You can go to Wisconsin, Philadelphia. All of these places, these battleground states, will be won by not a lot of votes. So it's important for Donald Trump to run up those numbers. RFK could make a difference in a place like Arizona or Georgia or Philadelphia. We really don't know because we never had any good polling on RFK himself.
Georgia. Okay, I'm glad you brought up Georgia because I want to talk about it anyway. I'll stick with you on this for a second, Malik. We kind of were chuckling last night because we were looking at some of the social media posts from Trump when Harris was speaking. At one point, we'll put this up, I think we have an article about Brian Kemp. He went after, as it says here in the AP, weeks after blistering Georgia's GOP governor, Donald Trump warms to Brian Kemp. So there's your point, Malik, that he obviously sees Georgia, I'm thinking, as a very, very close race, and all of a sudden Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, is a friend again, right?
It looks different now. About a month ago, Donald Trump was comfortably ahead in Georgia, but now with Kamala Harris is in the race, we don't know what that will look like. So the Trump campaign is making another go for it when it comes to Georgia. And I am happy. I was very critical of Donald Trump going down to Georgia and criticizing the popular governor who beat Stacey Abrams the second time around. Donald Trump needs Governor Brian Kemp's infrastructure in Georgia. That's how he's going to win Georgia. And so I think that it is a great thing that he's making amends with this governor of that state.
Well, here's the thing about Trump and Georgia, Jonathan. Trump's been his own worst enemy, particularly in that state. The attacks, like Malik says, on the governor, who he's probably ideologically aligned with. And don't forget, last time around, he suppressed turnout by complaining about the election, saying it was rigged when it wasn't. He lost. And he went down there and they lost the 2 Senate races. I covered both of those Senate races in person. And you could really argue that the reason they lost, they being the Republicans, because Trump came down, he held a rally, he talked about everything but the people running for Senate. He was complaining about himself, and then nobody showed up to, not nobody, but fewer people showed up to vote. So what's your thoughts, Jonathan, on Georgia?
I think Georgia is absolutely in play. I think Donald Trump realized that, and that's why he, sort of accepted the apology of Brian Kemp and is going to need him to help him if he's even going to be competitive. But I think your point is right. He can't help himself but go there and talk about himself. There's nothing Donald Trump loves more than talking about Donald Trump. And what you saw from Kamala Harris and Democrats for the last 4 days was talking about unity and togetherness and community. And that's the message they're going to take to Georgia. And look, I'm happy to put Raphael Warnock, John Ossoff, Stacey Abrams, and that entire team that was able to win in 2020 up against, I guess, a fractured Donald Trump, Brian Kemp new relationship. And I'd love it if Herschel Walker and Marjorie Taylor Greene were out there every day. We just had Jeff Duncan speaking at our convention. So I have a feeling one of those is going to be a bit more popular than the other.
Former lieutenant governor there in Georgia. Okay, let's talk about one more state. This one, by the way, I'm certainly not predicting Harris is going to win, but let's talk about Texas. Not necessarily because of the presidential race, but Jonathan, to you first on Texas Tribune article. Harris shrinks Trump's lead in Texas, and Colin Allred is running for Senate, is now within striking distance of Cruz. In that article, they're citing a poll, the University of Houston, I believe. There it is, that came out. So throw to the side the fact that Trump's not up as much, but focus on the fact that that might impact that Senate race. We've talked about it for years, whether Texas will be in play for Democrats. Do you think it is, at least for the Senate? Because otherwise the map still really favors Republicans. Jonathan, what do you say?
I think it's getting closer to being in play. I think Colin Allred is running an excellent campaign. And look, nobody is more unpopular in Texas than Ted Cruz. So that benefits Colin Allred. Remember, Beto O'Rourke came out of nowhere, was a unknown candidate, and almost beat Ted Cruz. Colin Allred is 100 times better candidate. He knows the state. He's campaigning in places that Republicans traditionally win. And I think we forget, because we think Texas is this big red state, Texas is bluer than Iowa in a presidential election. So if we can increase turnout there, especially in the Hispanic communities, Colin Allred's going to give Ted Cruz a run for his money.
At the end of the day, most of the states, I was using the joke about Pennsylvania, but most of them look that way. A little bit of blue where the people are and a lot of red. I mean, that's just the way the country looks. But this Texas thing's been kind of a pipe dream, you say, for Democrats. But Malik, are they getting closer? And are you worried about the Senate race? Again, not the presidential race there.
Nope, not worried about the Senate race at all. And you're right. This is something that people have been talking about with Florida, with Texas for quite some time. Beto O'Rourke. We've had candidates in other places, like remember Jamie Harrison in South Carolina. Remember Amy Grath in Kentucky. All of these were supposed to be competitive against a Mitch McConnell and a Lindsey Graham. Ultimately, they were not. Donald Trump will win Texas. Ted Cruz will win the Senate seat in Texas. And maybe Democrats can look about 12 years from now and take either one of those seats.
Probably had the same interview 12 years ago. All right, Malik, thank you. Jonathan as well. Good panel. Quick break. News Nation now, and we will be right back here in just a moment.